After scaring some skateboarders away from a dead girl's resting place, Ichigo, apologizing to her, promises to bring her some new flowers to replace those damaged by the skaters, telling her to go to heaven quickly. That evening, Ichigo, seeing Rukia Kuchiki in his bedroom, initially mistakes her for a burglar, but when Ichigo realizes only he can see the intruder, he accepts Rukia is a ghost. When he refuses to believe her explanation about Shinigami, Rukia binds him with Kido. As a hollow attacks the house, Ichigo, upon hearing his sister's pleas for help, breaks free and rushes to stop the hollow. Surprised at its monstrous appearance, Ichigo charges at it with a baseball bat in an attempt to release the captive Yuzu. Rukia frees Yuzu, but Ichigo's reckless actions force Rukia to shield him with her body, severely injuring her. Seeing Ichigo's determination to protect his family, Rukia offers to temporarily turn him into a Shinigami by piercing his chest with her Zanpakuto and transferring half of her power to him. Absorbing almost all of Rukia's power, Ichigo, making short work of the hollow, collapses afterwards. Ichigo learns that Rukia is now his classmate. The following morning, Ichigo is horrified when he discovers Rukia is now a part of his class, and she has altered his family's memories of the attack. She insists he must help her do her job while she awaits the return of her powers. When Ichigo refuses, Rukia, forcing his soul out of his body, takes him to a park where a hollow is about to attack. She persuades Ichigo to perform her duties. After undergoing some training with Rukia to improve his combat tactics, a hollow bursts into his room. Rukia, who has taken to staying in his closet, forces Ichigo's soul out of his body. He cuts off part of the hollow's mask, revealing it to be Sara Inu. Explaining the origins of hollows, Rukia states Orium Inu is in danger, as hollows often attack their relatives. They rush to Orium's apartment, where Ichigo manages to stop the hollow before it eats Orium's and Tatsuki's souls. Sara uses Ichigo's Zanpakuto to purify himself. At Orium's apartment, Ichigo initially panics when he sees her soul separated from her body, but Rukia explains there is still time to save her. Still intent on eating Orium, the hollow attacks. During Ichigo's subsequent fight with Acid Wire, Orium, stepping in between them, gets bitten. Her influence temporarily restores Sara's conscience, prompting him to purify himself with Ichigo's Zanpakuto. Rukia explains to Ichigo hollows defeated by a Zanpakuto are purified and sent to Soul Society. As Ichigo and Orium talk, Rukia, healing her, erases her memory of the event. Karin pleads with Ichigo. At school, Ichigo fends off Mizuru Kojima's suggestions of a relationship with Rukia and Riki Oshima's threats about his hair color. Ichigo notices Sato has a parakeet with him, and there is a spirit inside it. When Rukia confirms it is just a lonely plus, which they should send to the Soul Society that night, Ichigo complains about missing another night of sleep. Upon returning home, Ichigo helps with the injured from a car accident, among them Sato. Ichigo notes the wound on his back was inflicted by a hollow. The next morning, Ichigo tracks the spirit inside the parakeet using Riraku in order to find Sato. When they find Sato, he runs away from them. Telling him it is dangerous to be by himself, Ichigo is distracted by an ill Karin. At Rukia's behest, he brings her home. Karin tells him she saw the plus memories, and he saw his mother being murdered. After placing her in her bed, Ichigo, rushing to help Sato, reflects on how long it had been since he last saw Karin cry. Ichigo returns Shrieker's bombs. Ichigo arrives to take over fighting Shrieker. When Rukia releases him from his body, he, injuring Shrieker, notices small creatures nearby, and is told they spit out explosive leeches. After asking Shrieker if he was the one who killed the child's parents, which he confirms, Ichigo, catching one of the leeches, slams it into Shrieker's mouth. When the hollow refuses to trigger them, Ichigo, ripping out its tongue, stabs his sword into Shrieker's leg. Asking him how it feels to be unable to move or fight and if he can savor what it is like to be murdered, Ichigo cuts through his head, and Shrieker is pulled into hell. After Rukia explains about hell, She tells the Plus they will send him to Soul Society, and Ichigo says he might see his mother there. Ichigo questions the use of the artificial soul. The following day, Ichigo, noting Sato's memory has been erased, receives a Jikengan from Rukia, who, after explaining its purpose, forces him to try one. Unconvinced by the artificial soul's personality, Ichigo is forced to leave it in his body when they receive an order from Soul Society. After defeating the Hollow, a concerned Ichigo, rushing back, sees his body jump out of an upstairs window and run away extremely fast. As they chase after him, Rukia tells him it must be a mod soul. As Rukia explains what she means to an angry Ichigo, he, asking if Rukia is alright with the idea of the mod souls being created and killed all for Soul Society's convenience, wonders how the mod soul must feel about being persecuted and gaining his body. Receiving a warning about a hollow, they, hurrying to its location, find the mod soul is fighting it. Rushing to his aid, Ichigo reminds him he is using his body. As the two continue arguing, they defeat the hollow together. When Kisukura removes the mod soul from Ichigo's body, Ichigo, asking him what he is going to do with it, asks who he is. When Rukia gives the mod soul to Ichigo, he thanks her for not throwing him away. Ichigo and family plan their trip to Masaka's grave. After failing to find a body to place the mod soul in, Ichigo, placing him in a plushie, decides to call him Khan. On the 16th of June, Ichigo, woken by Khan, scrambles to hide him and Rukia as Yuzo comes into the room to say Mizuru is waiting for him. Apologizing to Mizuru, he, noting his memory has been erased, remembers Rukia had told him Urahara must have worked hard. As Rukia leaves, Ichigo, complaining about Ishine not waking him up as usual, notices the date. That night, the Kurosakis hold a family meeting to discuss their trip to Masaka's grave the following day. Ichigo asks Rukia if he can take the day off from the Shinigami work, as it is the day Masaka was killed. Rukia asks about Masaka's death. On the 17th of July, the Kurosaki family visits Masaka's grave. Annoyed that Rukia followed them, Ichigo, becoming angry when she asks if Masaka was killed by a hollow, notices the same girl he saw the night Masaka died, and, running after her, tells Rukia he killed Masaka. At Masaka's grave, Ichigo, watching his family's antics, reflects on his mother's death and its impact on his family. Sensing the Ryutsu of a hollow, Ichigo realizes the twins are easy targets. As the hollow attempts to eat Yuzu, Ichigo, arriving, cuts the twins free. Demanding to know why the girl he saw when Masaka died is there, he asks if she is controlled by the hollow. When Rukia tells him the hollow is called Grand Fisher and it uses the girl as a lure to trick and devour humans who have high levels of spiritual power, Ichigo, realizing Grand Fisher killed his mother, lunges at it. Stopping Rukia from interfering, he, insisting on fighting alone, instructs her to mind his sisters. Grand Fisher attempts to manipulate Ichigo. Struggling against Grand Fisher, Ichigo is subjected to the hollow's transcribability. Transforming his lure into an image of Masaka, Grand Fisher explains about his ability. As he pierces Ichigo's chest, Ichigo, stabbing the hollow's chest, grabs his arm, saying he has finally caught him, and slashes open his chest. Transferring its form into the lure, Grand Fisher escapes. As Rukia tries to convince Ichigo he cannot fight him anymore, he, insisting he can and the hollow is still not dead yet, soon collapses. Using most of her strength to heal his stomach wound, Rukia leaves his other injuries. When Ichigo awakens, in his human body, in great pain, Rukia reminds him the wounds his soul receives will show up when he returns to his body. When Ichigo asks her if he lost, she tells him he won, since the hollow fled and nobody died. Saying Grand Fisher is not dead, Ichigo walks off. Ishine gives Ichigo some advice. When Ichigo, at Masaka's grave, apologizes for not being able to avenge her, Ishine notes the time has gone by quickly, and it has already been 10 years since Masaka died. When Ichigo corrects his error, Ishine states he was so close. When Ichigo loudly complains about this, Ishine says Masaka can rest easily if she sees him being so lively. When he starts smoking a cigarette, Ichigo says he thought he quit smoking when Karin and Yuzu were born. Ishine explains he smokes on this one occasion, as the only time Masaka complimented his looks while they were dating is when she saw him smoking. When Ichigo asks why nobody blames him for her death, Ishine, dismissing the suggestion, says Masaka would be mad at him, and she would gladly die to protect her child. Reminding Ichigo he is the woman he loved gave her life to protect, he, telling him to live his life well, leaves. Asking Rukia if her powers are returning, Ichigo asks her to allow him to remain a Shinigami for a while longer regardless. He says he wants to become stronger so he can defeat Hollows, protect those who are targeted, and defeat Grand Fisher, otherwise, he will not be able to face Masaka. Orium apologizes to Ichigo. While Yuzu and Ishine are watching Don Kanenji's Ghost Bust TV program one Wednesday evening, Ichigo asks Karin why she is not watching it with them. She tells Ichigo she can see spirits about as clearly as he can, and is not interested in the ghost show. Remembering she saw the Hollow who attacked the house when he first met Rukia, Ichigo realizes she might be able to see Shinigami too. The next morning at school, Orium, performing Don Kanenji's pose as Ichigo arrives in class, asks him to do the pose with her. As Ichigo's friends all do the pose, Ichigo tells Kigo he is not going to the live recording of Ghost Bust at the abandoned hospital in Karakura, despite his attempts to convince him to go 101 the following Wednesday. Ichigo accompanies his family to watch Ghost Bust being filmed. When Orium apologizes to him for trying to get him to do Don Kanenji's pose, he, telling her it is okay, reveals Kigo and Mizuru know he despises it, but yet still do it anyway. When asked why he came, he, stating Ishine and Yuzu are huge fans of the show, says they would look pitiful if just the two of them went. When Orium tells him he is so kind, Ichigo dismisses it as normal. Ichigo fends off the Hollow. Telling him he must be tired from his dual life, Rukia instructs him to use this chance to relax. Surprised she is concerned about his health, Ichigo, asking if there really is a spirit in the hospital, says the Shinigami would have dealt with it already. Rukia says it is likely to be a Hibikari, a soul on its way to becoming a Hollow. When Ichigo asks Rukia if they should perform Kinso on it to prevent it from becoming a Hollow, she says it takes months to turn into a Hollow. She says to do it after the show to avoid trouble in case of a struggle, but Ichigo is unconvinced. Meanwhile, Don Kanenji jams his staff into the partially open hole in the Hibikari's chest. As Ichigo tries to stop him, he is caught by security. Urahara frees Ichigo's Shinigami form from his body, allowing him to knock Kanenji away from the Hibikari. As Ichigo realizes the medium can see him, the Hibikari vanishes in an explosion. As Kanenji promises to send Ichigo to heaven too, Rukia shouts at him to look up, where they see the spirit reforming into a Hollow on top of the hospital. As Ichigo and Kanenji bicker, the Hollow charges at them. Ichigo fends off its attack, and when the Hollow gets its head stuck in a wall, Ichigo drags Kanenji inside. The demi-hollow is defeated by Ichigo. Ichigo insists they stay inside to avoid the audience being caught up in the fighting. When the hollow attacks again, Ichigo's Zanpakuto becomes stuck in the ceiling. Ichigo realizes he never thought about the corridors being too confined to use his sword in. When the hollow glues Ichigo's hands together, Kanenji, jamming its mouth open with his staff, frees Ichigo's blade. When Ichigo's sword becomes embedded in the hollow's shoulder, it drags him up to the roof. Freeing himself, Ichigo takes advantage of the open space to defeat the hollow. When Kanenji praises him, Ichigo, telling him to stop his antics, explains it is the same spirit Kanenji thought he had sent to heaven. Stating regretting it is pointless, as he did not know, Ichigo directs Kanenji to the crowd. Kanenji thanks him, complimenting his courage, quick wits, and strength, and asks that they work together in the future. When Ichigo agrees to help him once in a while, Kanenji forces him to take a Don Kanenji fan club card, signed to my number one pupil. The following day, Rukia helps Ichigo and his friends get out of trouble for their actions at the abandoned hospital when they are brought before the principal and Kajin, who states their escapades were broadcast live nationwide. That afternoon, Ichigo, answering the door, meets Don Kanonji. Closing and locking the door, he demands to know how he found out about his house. When Kanonji reveals he invited Rukia along, Ichigo realizes it was her who told him where he lived. Seeing Kanonji, Yuzu knocks Ichigo over while opening the door. When Rukia's Denrai Shinki alerts her to a hollow, they rush off to fight it. After numerous incidents of arriving at the supposed site of a hollow attack, only to find there is no hollow, Ichigo and Rukia bicker. When Ichigo asks if there is another Shinigami defeating the hollows before him, Rukia tells him Shinigami are strictly sorted, and it should not be the case. Ichigo tries to keep away from Rukia at school to avoid the rumors since their appearance on Ghost Bust. While discussing his high grades with Kigo and Mizuru, Ichigo notes his orange hair causes him a lot of trouble, as older students pick on him and teachers watch him closely, so he studies so the school does not complain about him. Rukia drags Ichigo off, prompting him to complain about the rumors regarding them. When she tells him to complain later, as there is a hollow, Ichigo tells her he will not forgive her if it is not there this time, but they find nothing. After another incident following school, Ichigo tells Rukia to do something about the problem as she drags his body from its hiding place. The pair are approached by Urayu Ishida, who asks Ichigo if it is correct he can see spirits, which Ichigo denies is even possible. When a new hollow appears, Urayu, killing it, introduces himself, saying he hates Shinigami and Ichigo. Urayu grabs Ichigo's red spirit thread. At school, Ichigo, reflecting upon his encounter with Urayu, wonders why he would say such things to a complete stranger and why Urayu was angry. Realizing he cannot remember his full name, Ichigo lists off possible names out loud. Overhearing him, Orium, stating Urayu is in their class, takes him to the handicrafts club to show him Urayu. When Orium asks what happened between Ichigo and Urayu, Ichigo dismisses it as no big deal. After school, Ichigo follows Urayu as he leaves. Asking him if he intends to follow him home, Urayu notes he had noticed him spying on him from the classroom doorway. When Ichigo applauds him, Urayu states it is due to Ichigo's inability to restrain his spiritual power, and he lacks the ability to sense Ryutsu, as evidenced by him not noticing Urayu until that day. Revealing he noticed Ichigo's unusually high spiritual power and his acquisition of Shinigami powers, Urayu, inviting Ichigo to fight him, says Shinigami are unnecessary in the human world. Though Ichigo ridicules the idea, Urayu succeeds in convincing him to fight him, and he uses Kan to free his Shinigami form. Using some hollow bait to cause hollows to gather in Karakura Town, Urayu states the one who defeats the most hollows within 24 hours wins. When Ichigo, angered by this, demands to know why he is exposing the town's residents to such danger, Urayu tells him not to worry, as they will kill all the hollows. As Ichigo tries to make him undo it, Urayu tells him hollows will soon flood the town, and he should try to protect as many people as possible. When Urayu tells him hollows tend to prefer people with high spiritual power, Ichigo runs off to find Karin. After slaying his third hollow and saving a pair of pluses, Ichigo, struggling to remember where Karin is, sends Kan to get Rukia's Denrai Shinki to aid in reacting to the hollows 121, defeating the hollows between the Kurosaki clinic and the last place where he saw Karin. Ichigo thinks it should be safe for her now. Ichigo confronts Urayu. Having found Urayu, Ichigo bickers with Kan when he arrives. Unable to attract their attention by shouting, Urayu fires an arrow at Ichigo, who, blocking it, insists it is a battle between him and Urayu, and the amount of hollows they beat is irrelevant. As Kan points out, there is a large crack forming in the sky, and Urayu begins firing arrows into the group of hollows. Ichigo tells him there are too many, and they need to come up with a strategy. Asking him if he is afraid, Urayu charges towards the hollows. When Rukia explains the fall of the Quincy at the hands of the Shinigami, Ichigo, running after Urayu, attacks several hollows around him. When Ichigo, telling Urayu he does not know or care about whether the Shinigami or Quincy were right, expresses frustration at his methods, Urayu tells him he thought the Shinigami were correct until his sensei was killed in front of him. Telling Ichigo of his sensei's attempts to convince the Shinigami to work together with the remaining Quincy and how he died fighting a group of huge hollows without achieving that goal, Urayu says he must prove the strength of the Quincy to the Shinigami. Pointing out his sensei's wish was to work together, Ichigo, asking if he will do that now, says fighting back to back is the best way to deal with the situation. Ichigo attacks the Minos Grande. As the two begrudgingly work together, Ichigo, telling him his approach to their fight is endangering the people he wants to protect, says he will not forgive him for that. They agree to beat each other up after the hollows have been dealt with, but as they prepare to attack a horde of hollows, a Minos Grande appears. As Urutsumiya, Tessai Tsukabishi, Hinta Hanakari, and Urahara arrive to fight the hollows, Urahara tells Ichigo to concentrate on fighting the Minos. Seeing its size, Ichigo, questioning if it is in fact a hollow, is shocked to see it eating the nearby hollows. Saying there is no way they can figure out how to fight such a monster and they will have to simply cut it repeatedly until it succumbs to its injuries, Ichigo, charging towards the Minos, attacks its leg, but is knocked back by the unfazed Minos. Urayu's plan is put into motion. Noticing Ichigo's power flows into his bow when he touches it, Urayu, planning to fire an enlarged arrow at the Minos, tells Ichigo to increase his power to maximum. Stating he never controls his energy output, Ichigo says it must be at maximum all the time. When the Minos starts to charge a Zero, Ichigo, rushing towards it, blocks the Zero with his Zanpakuto. His power increasing as he resists the Zero, Ichigo repels the attack, injuring the Minos in the process. As the Minos retreats, Ichigo, claiming victory, collapses as his Zanpakuto begins to destabilize. Noting it will explode, Urayu begins to dissipate the energy by absorbing it and releasing it by firing arrows into the sky, injuring himself. Urayu tells him to make sure he lives so he can beat him later. The following day, when Rukia tells Ichigo not to pay attention to Urayu's injuries, Ichigo denies being worried. Later, when he overhears Kigo telling Mizuru he saw Urayu talking to himself the previous day, believing it to be related to a theater, Ichigo is thankful Kigo is an idiot. Asking Urayu to join them for lunch, Ichigo later regrets it, due to the atmosphere which prevails over their meal. Ichigo finds Kon tied up. That night, Ichigo, taking the leftovers from dinner to give to Rukia, finds she is gone. At 2 a.m., Ichigo, wondering whether she is going to return that night, notes it would be nice not to have Shinigami duties to carry out for once. Hearing a muffled noise, Ichigo finds Kon gagged and tied to the back of the toilet bowl. When Ichigo asks why he was tied up, Kon, saying Rukia is in big trouble, shows Ichigo a note she left on his desk. Confused by the message, which tells them she has to leave and they should go into hiding instead of looking for her, Ichigo decides to change into his Shinigami form and find her. Realizing he cannot change form without Rukia, Ichigo demands a reluctant Kon change him into a Shinigami. Appearing at the window, Urahara changes him into his Shinigami form. Renji Abarai unleashes his Shikai against Ichigo. As Lieutenant Renji Abarai attacks Rukia, Ichigo, arriving, attacks him. When Renji notes the size of Ichigo's Zanpakuto, Ichigo replies he thought it was large compared to Rukia's, but there had not been anyone else to compare it to. Realizing he is the human who took Rukia's Shinigami powers, Renji, attacking him, asks Ichigo what the name of his Zanpakuto is. When Ichigo, stating he has not named his sword, asks if they actually give them names, Renji activates his Shikai, surprising Ichigo with the change of form of his Zanpakuto. Leaping into the air, he slashes Ichigo's shoulder. Ichigo's final blow to Renji is stopped. As Renji, explaining about the Shikai form of Zanpakuto, moves to attack him, Rukia attempts to stop him so Ichigo can flee, but Ichigo's Ryutsu increases, and he, injuring the surprised Renji, quickly overwhelms him. As Ichigo attempts to end the fight, Byakuya severs his sword's tip, leaving Ichigo stunned. As he prepares for Byakuya's subsequent attack, Byakuya, appearing behind him, stabs him. Falling to the ground, Ichigo, wondering whether he was attacked from the front or from behind, is stabbed again by Byakuya. As Byakuya and Rukia talk about Ichigo, he, grabbing Byakuya's leg, tells him not to talk about him as if he is dead. As Byakuya tells him to let go, Ichigo instructs the captain to look at him when he is talking so he can hear him. Kicking Ichigo's hand away from her brother, Rukia, telling him he should know his place, tells Byakuya she is ready to leave. As Ichigo protests, Renji tells him to stop making things worse. When Rukia tells Byakuya there is no point in deliberately killing Ichigo, as he will soon stop breathing on his own, Ichigo asks if this is a joke, prompting Rukia to state if he tries to follow her, she will never forgive him. As she tells him to conserve what energy he has left so he may live a moment longer, Byakuya, acquiescing to Rukia's request, states Ichigo should die shortly due to his injuries, but if he does survive, he will no longer possess any Shinigami powers. As they leave, Ichigo, noting he cannot move or speak, reflects upon how he came to protect Rukia, but instead she protected him again. As Ichigo contemplates his injuries in the rain, Urahara approaches him. Ichigo awakens with an unexpected bedfellow. When Ichigo awakens in Urahara's shop, Urahara tells him his wounds are not yet fully healed, and if he moves too much, he may die. When Ichigo asks him about Uriu's condition, Urahara states Uriu's injuries were treated on the spot, and when he left, he was worried about Ichigo, stating Ichigo was the only one who could beat the Shinigami and save Rukia. When Ichigo says he cannot do anything, as Rukia has been taken to Soul Society and he cannot follow, Urahara reveals he can send Ichigo there if he trains with Urahara for the next 10 days, revealing Soul Society typically allows a grace period of 1 month before executions. Saying Ichigo will die if he goes there in his current condition, he reveals he purposely allowed Ichigo to fight Renji and Byakuya so he would realize this after having fought them himself. He states it will take 7 days to open the gate to Soul Society, leaving Ichigo with 13 days in Soul Society to rescue Rukia. Though unsure if he can become strong enough in 10 days, Ichigo agrees to Urahara's deal. Orium asks Ichigo about Rukia's disappearance. Giving Ichigo some pills to take every hour, Urahara, saying he will recover from his injuries by dinner time, sends him to school for the final day of the term. At school, Ichigo notes how nobody appears to remember Rukia. As Misato dismisses the class for summer, Ichigo, noting Uriu's absence, thinks he would remember Rukia. As he walks home after dismissing Kigo's invitation to spend the holiday with him, he meets Orium, who, asking him where Rukia is, notes everyone has forgotten about her, but she believed Ichigo would know. Explaining the situation to her, Ichigo is surprised she can see his Shinigami form. Noting Ichigo has already made up his mind to rescue Rukia, Orium, telling him to go save her, insists she does not want her friend to die either. Thanking her, Ichigo, going to the Urahara shop, shows Urahara his healed wounds. Telling Urahara he told Ishine he would be sleeping over at a friend's house, he asks Urahara to teach him well. Urutsumiya attacks Ichigo. In Urahara's training area, Ichigo's soul form is freed from his body, and he finds it difficult to move. Urahara reveals Byakuya destroyed the source of his power, leaving him without any Shinigami powers, and he must restore these in order to fight the Shinigami. Explaining about Ryoryoku, stating the more one's Ryoryoku rises, the sharper the movements of their spiritual body become, he says if Ichigo can manage to move even better with his spiritual body than he can with his mortal body, they will have completely recovered his Ryoryoku. Urahara has Urutsumiya attack Ichigo, and she lunges at him, creating a large cloud of dust and debris. Emerging from the dust, Ichigo runs away from Ururu after another near miss. Realizing he is able to run away from her, Ichigo attempts to dodge her attacks directly. Successfully dodging, Ichigo attacks Ururu by trying to hit her headgear lightly, believing the weight difference will do the rest. When he hits and cuts her face, Urua kicks him into a rocky outcropping. Catching Ichigo before he hits it, Tessai cushions him from the impact. Tessai severs Ichigo's chain of fate. Congratulating him on clearing the lesson, Urahara asks if Ichigo is still having trouble breathing or moving, which he is not. As Urahara says he has successfully recovered his spirit energy, and the soul tends to gain the Ryoryoku faster when it is in danger of being destroyed, Tessai, cutting Ichigo's chain of fate, pins him to the ground. Telling him the chain has already begun to corrode from the severed end, Urahara states if it reaches his chest, Ichigo will become a hollow, but he can avoid this by becoming a Shinigami instead. The point of this lesson, which Urahara calls Shattered Shaft, is to restore Ichigo's Shinigami powers. Dropped to the bottom of a shaft, he is bound with a kin spell, and Urahara tells him to scale the vertical sides of the deep shaft. Revealing there is a gas at the bottom of the shaft which speeds up the corrosion process to at most 72 hours, he tells Ichigo to become a Shinigami and climb out of the hole before that, or else he will become a hollow, and they will destroy him. After the corrosion of the chain's fifth link, Ichigo notes the process alternates between a few minutes of painful corrosion and a few hours of dormancy. Only able to attempt to escape during the dormant phases, Ichigo unsuccessfully tries to run up the wall. Asking him if he is hungry, Hinta Hanakari explains a soul feeling hungry is a sign they will soon become a hollow. Later, as Ichigo wonders how long he has been in the hole for and how he can get out of it, Hinta runs down the shaft's wall with a platter of fruit for him. When Ichigo, denying he is hungry, says the chain is still long, Hinta reveals it has been 70 hours since he entered the shaft, and the final corrosion phase is stronger than the earlier ones. As the remaining length of the chain begins to corrode, a hole opens in Ichigo's chest, and a mask begins to form over his face. Urahara explains the mask forming before his body reforms shows Ichigo is resisting the transformation. Ichigo awakens in his inner world. Awakening inside his consciousness, Ichigo sees a man standing on a building. Surprised that Ichigo does not recognize him, the man says his name, but Ichigo cannot hear it. Stating it is sad, the man asks how many times he has to tell him his name before he is able to hear it, as he thought nobody in this world knew him better than Ichigo. When Ichigo falls from the building, the man, following him, states he should not worry, as Shinigami control death. As Ichigo tells him he is not currently a Shinigami, the man, telling him to focus the Reishi around him underneath his feet to stand on, urges Ichigo to remember a time when he stopped in mid-air as a Shinigami. He tells Ichigo Byakuya destroyed the powers given to him by Rukia, but Ichigo has his own Shinigami powers, which were hidden deep in his soul and awakened by Rukia's power. As the world crumbles around him, he instructs Ichigo to find it. Ichigo emerges from the shattered shaft. With the buildings of his inner world dissolving into countless boxes, Ichigo, falling through a fissure into water, wonders how he can find his own powers. Remembering Urayu stating Shinigami have red Riraku, he uses this to find a box containing a Zanpakuto's hilt. Telling him this time he ought to hear his name, the man urges him to take the hilt. As Ichigo struggles to pull out the Zanpakuto, back in the shaft, the Kido restraining Ichigo breaks apart. When Tessai activates the next stage of the Kido, Banken, an explosion erupts from the shaft. As the smoke clears, Ichigo, wearing a hollow mask and Shinigami clothes, uses his still broken Zanpakuto to smash the hollow mask. Congratulating him on his success, Urahara says he is now a complete Shinigami. Having sworn to kill Urahara when he got out of the shaft, Ichigo hits him in the eye with the sword's hilt. Urahara starts the third lesson, which is simply to knock the hat off of Urahara's head. As Ichigo proposes a 5-minute time limit, Urahara draws a blade from within his cane. Ichigo and Kisuke Urahara clash. Overwhelming Ichigo, Urahara, revealing his sword is a Zanpakuto, activates Benihim's Shikai. As Ichigo remembers Renji using his Shikai during their fight, Urahara, telling him every Zanpakuto has a name, cuts through the remains of Ichigo's blade until just the hilt remains, saying if he continues to fight with just the hilt, he will kill him. As Ichigo, thinking he is going to die, runs away, Urahara continues to attack him. Ichigo sees the man from his inner world again, who, asking why Ichigo ran when he has not yet called him, reveals his name is Zanjitsu. Stopping in his tracks, Ichigo, turning towards Urahara, calls out Zanjitsu, activating his Shikai. Looking at the new form of his Zanpakuto, Ichigo, telling Urahara he might not be able to hold back, swings Zanjitsu at him, who uses Chikasumi no Tate. As the dust settles, a headless Urahara, stating he would have lost an arm if it were not for Chikasumi no Tate, says he did not expect so much from one swing. After completing Urahara's training, Ichigo has a relatively normal summer holiday while waiting for the gate to Soul Society to be opened. On the 1st of August, Ichigo and his friends gather for a fireworks festival, where they catch up. Ishine and the twins, running up to Ichigo, knock him down a bank. When Ichigo asks if they are drunk, Ishine reveals a juice seller used wine to dilute their juice instead of water. Telling the group they saved a seat on the opposite bank of the river that morning, Ishine heads off with the girls and several of Ichigo's friends. Later that night, after complaining to a drunken Ishine about having to carry his sisters, Ichigo tells him he will be leaving soon, and he might not be back until the summer vacation ends. Ishine presents Ichigo with a protective charm. 7 days after completing his training, Ichigo is summoned to the Urahara shop. As he leaves, Ichigo says goodbye to his sisters. Ishine lends him an amulet, which he claims Masaka gave to him, stating it will bring him good fortune. On his way to Urahara's, Ichigo meets up with Orium. Revealing he did not know she was going until Urahara mentioned it, Ichigo asks her if she is sure about it. When they arrive at the shop, they find Sato waiting for them, and Ichigo, asking where Uryu is, says he had heard he was coming too. When Uryu, arriving in a Quincy outfit, promises to show Ichigo how powerful he has become, Ichigo criticizes him for walking the entire way there wearing that outfit. Interrupting them, Urahara invites the group inside. The Kotosu chases Ichigo's group through the Danga. In the underground training area, Urahara, revealing the Senkaimon they will be using to enter Soul Society, removes Ichigo's Shinigami form from his body. As the others examine his body, Ichigo complains about them touching it freely. Explaining how the Senkaimon works, Urahara says it will only stay open for 4 minutes. If they do not reach Soul Society in that time, they will become trapped in the Danga. When Uryu tells them only those who are truly ready for the task can go, Ichigo says everyone gathered there has already made their decision and will go to Soul Society. When Uryu tells him they will never return if they lose, Ichigo states they simply have to win. When the Senkaimon opens, Ichigo tells Kon to take care of his family. Entering the gate, Ichigo, Uryu, Orium, Sato, and Uryu appear in the Danga. As they run, Uryu's cape is caught by the Kiryu. Ichigo is warned not to use his Zanpakuto, as the Kiryu will trap it and he will not escape. After Sato frees Uryu, the group are chased by the Kotosu, and Orium uses her shield to protect them from it, propelling them through the exit and into Soul Society.